This is Brenda Anholtz, professor of communication at Ohlone College, and today we're going to be talking about linguistic style in your speeches. So let's get started. First of all, linguistic devices you're probably familiar with. You learned about them in your English class, but they're a little bit different in speech because they're spoken. And so then we have all the power of our nonverbals behind them, and they often are more rhythmic. And they create more impact, and they can create visual imagery in our speeches. And so I want to talk about 10 different devices today that you can use in your speech. I have some examples from some videos for us to look at as well. So let's get started with these first three. Metaphor. Metaphor is a wonderful way for you to create imagery in your speech. For example, in this Bill Clinton quote, he said, "Remember that America cannot lead in a world unless here at home we weave the threads of our coat of many colors into the fabric of one America." And this really creates this beautiful imagery of coming together as a diverse nation. And again, metaphors make an implied comparison. Simile is also a wonderful technique that you can use. It compares two things using the words like or as. For example, in Lee McCoby's TED Talk about being coming out trans, they are talking about how they felt at church praying and was quoted as saying, "My tiny body drooping like a question mark." And it helps create an image of sadness. And another example is alliteration. Alliteration, I think English teachers often do not like. They think it's a little too pithy, but in speech, it really creates a lot of really powerful imagery, and paired with other techniques like rhyme, it creates a lot of rhythm. And in this next speech, it also often is used in, the alliteration also as antithesis, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but that's when there's opposite ideas. But this is the full clip, the full 5-minute clip of Amanda Gorman's poem from the Biden-Harris inauguration. And we're going to watch the whole thing because it is tremendously powerful. And while I was preparing this video, we had the inauguration and I saw it and I cried and it was so good. So let's take a look at this one.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Wow, that is brave and beautiful. What a great speech. And what a fun lesson in such a timely speech. Okay, so one of the things that she did in addition to the alliteration was antithesis. So she often contrasted one idea with another in these pairs, and often they were with the beginning first consonant sound. So antithesis is using parallel structures but having opposing meanings. I have another example here from Barack Obama's Democratic National Convention speech. Your success as a family. Oh, I'm sorry. This was, I have two examples here. First of all, Barbara Bush has one, so I can just lay it out for you so you can hear the syntactical structures of this. But Barbara Bush says, your success as a family, our success as a society depends not on what happens at the White House, but what happens in your house. And that lays out some antithesis of ideas. And again, we just saw Amanda Gorman do that a lot with pairs. In Barack Obama's Democratic National Convention speech, this speech was considered the reason why he won the ticket. And it is a short speech and analysis that I would like to share with you as well.
Waiters always look at me and think that I'm gonna have a little salad, maybe a soup, and that'll be the whole meal. And when I do my
energy, I am new. I'm someone who is dynamic.
And he doesn't do that so much anymore. He's a little more solemn and reserved when he gives speeches today, but I think it's more reflective of his office.
In the end, that's what this election is about. Do we participate in a politics of cynicism, or do we participate in a politics of hope? It's the hope of slaves sitting around a fire singing freedom songs. The hope of immigrants setting out for distant shores. The hope of a young naval lieutenant bravely patrolling the Mekong Delta. The hope of a mill worker's son who dares to defy the odds. The hope of a skinny kid with a funny name who believes that America has a place for him too. Hope in the face of difficulty. Hope in the face of uncertainty. The audacity of hope.
His appearance at that convention, which was the best speech of the convention, better than John Kerry's, was electrifying, and without it, he wouldn't be president.
I think sincerity means a lot. There are people who, when they speak the truth as they see it, and they're very effective doing that.
I believe this country will reclaim its promise, and out of this long political darkness, a brighter day will come. Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you.
Wonderful. Again, there was a lot of antithesis there where he was talking about, coming out of the darkness to have hope. And again, a lot of other things too. There was a lot of parallelism where he drew together different Americans who all had hope, who could come together. Repetition. We've seen this in the last two video examples, but repetition is repeating words or phrases more than once for emphasis. In this famous George Bush speech, we will not tire, we will not falter, and we will not fail. Again, creates a lot of impact. And again, we saw this in the last two speech videos as well. Rhythm and rhyme is the whole reason why stylistic devices in speech are so powerful, because they really create a cadence that can move your audience, and words that they have sound that resonates with the audience. For example, in this Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, "We will walk on our own feet, we will work with our own hands, and we will speak our own minds." Again, helps to create that cadence. All right. So moving on here, we have parallelism. I've already been talking about it because often many of these stylistic devices are using multiple techniques, but this is using similar syntactical patterns with several sentences or phrases. For example, Mary Fisher's Republican National Convention speech entitled "A Whisper of AIDS." She's the first person who nationally talked about AIDS in 1992. And this is one of my very favorite quotes that illustrates parallelism, even though we've already heard a bunch of them today. It does not care if you are Democrat or Republican. It does not ask whether you are black or white, male or female, gay or straight, young or old. And again, she's talking about AIDS here, but it really creates it creates a powerful image of bringing things together, of finding commonality. Omission, suspension, and inversion is kind of old-fashioned, but it sounds so cool. And I think because of that, we often see it in writing, but when we hear it in speech, it makes a big impact because we don't speak as we write. We are often more casual in our speech. But this is when you leave out words or you reverse traditional order or grammatical order, or placing a word at the end of a sentence. For example, in this famous JFK speech, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So a wonderful example of that. Personification is fun. It's giving inanimate objects lifelike characteristics. And in this case, nature still offers her bounty. This is actually not the right quote for this. Personification is like buzz and hiss. So I guess we cut and pasted the wrong one here. But I guess we'll move on. Okay, we have illusion. Illusion is probably one of my all-time favorites, and that is referencing or quoting a well-known source, such as a famous speech or some other historical document or text. Again, I think it's the social science teacher in me that looks at our field as historic. And we see it in a lot of famous speeches, but I have a relatively current speech from Leonardo DiCaprio from the UN. It is his climate change speech, and he is referencing a speech that Abraham Lincoln gave in his day. So let's take a listen to this.
The last speaker for this signing ceremony is the Academy Award Best Actor and the United Nations Messenger of Peace, Mr. Leonardo DiCaprio.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for the honor to address this body once more. And thanks to the distinguished climate leaders assembled here today who are ready to take action. President Abraham Lincoln was also thinking of bold action 150 years ago when he said, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country." He was speaking before the U.S. Congress to confront the defining issue of his time, slavery. Everyone knew it had to end, but no one had the political will to stop it. Remarkably, his words ring as true today when applied to the defining crisis of our time, climate change. As a UN messenger of peace, I have traveled all over the world for the last 2 years documenting how this crisis is changing the natural balance of our planet. I have seen cities like Beijing choked by industrial pollution, ancient boreal forests in Canada that have been clear-cut, and rainforests in Indonesia that have been incinerated. In India, I met farmers whose crops have been literally washed away by historic flooding. In America, I have witnessed unprecedented droughts in California and sea level rise flooding the streets of Miami. In Greenland and in the Arctic, I was astonished to see that ancient glaciers are rapidly disappearing well ahead of scientific predictions. All that I have seen and learned on my journey has absolutely terrified me.
It's a really wonderful, powerful speech, and I hope that you can all finish listening to that one. And again, I loved the parallel to Abraham Lincoln's plight of fighting against slavery, and Leonardo DiCaprio's current fight on behalf of all of us for climate change. And again, that reference to his speech was so good. Okay, onomatopoeia is the vocalization of words such as buzz, splash, hiss. Okay, now I think I made a mistake. Personification was the blanket of nature that provides its bounty from before. I've messed up. All right, narrative. Narrative is not often talked about in stylistic devices, yet I think it creates so much visual imagery that it should be included. So I have Barack Obama's fired up speech. It's very short. It's like 2 minutes long. We're going to listen to the whole thing. But the entire speech is a story that creates a visual image in the minds of the audience, and it serves as a symbol or a central theme of the speech. And I think that narrative is a wonderful stylistic device.
Your voice makes a difference. And if you don't believe that, I want to leave you with one last story. When I ran for the presidency in 08, I fly down to South Carolina. Alarm goes off, and I feel terrible. I am exhausted. Think I'm coming down with a cold. I open up the curtains. It's pouring down rain outside. Pouring down rain. Horrible day. I get the newspaper outside my door, and there's a bad story about me in the New York Times. I get dressed, shave, walk out. My umbrella blows open. That ever happened to you? And I get soaked. I'm just soaked. I get in the car. I say, all right, how long is it going to take to Greenwood? An hour and a half. Finally, I get out and I walk in, and there are like 15, 20 people there. And I will tell you, they didn't look any happier to see me than I did to see them. And so I go around the room and I say, how do you do? What do you do? But they're not really feeling it right now. And suddenly I hear this voice from the back just shout, fired up. And everybody in the room says, fired up. And then I hear the voice say, ready to go. And everybody in the room says, ready to go. And I don't know what's going on. I think these people are crazy. Maybe I shouldn't have come here. And then I look in the back of the room, and there's this middle-aged woman. She's got a big church hat, and she got, I think, a gold tooth. Turns out she holds a position in the local NAACP office, and also, I'm not kidding you, is a private detective. This is a true story. She's like she's like a private eye. Although it's hard to think that you wouldn't see her coming. She's very colorful. And she is known wherever she goes by saying this chant, fired up, ready to go. And every meeting she goes to, she does this thing. But the interesting thing is, after a while, I'm starting to get kind of fired up. I'm starting to feel like I'm ready to go. And all those negative thoughts and all those bad memories start kind of drifting away. And it just goes to show you how one voice can change a room. And if it can change a room, it can change a city. And if it can change a city, it can change a state. And if it can change a state, it can change a nation. And if it can change a nation, it can change the world. So I just have one question for you. Are you fired up? Ready to go? Fired up? Ready to go? Fired up? Ready to go?
That was a wonderful speech. I just love it. And I love how he concludes it too, not only with the chant, but prior to that with the parallelism, and in creating, one community to, one nation. It's wonderful. Okay, this concludes this lesson on linguistic devices. Please make time to go back after you've researched and written your speeches to add this creative element to create some impact. It will make all the difference in your speeches. Thank you.